It's going to be basically the second part of what we had earlier for clinical trials. Please welcome Dr. Jethro Ekuta.
Okay. All right. So while he's setting up, I'm just going to ask a few questions leading from how we started this morning in terms of the audience participation. So who can guess how long it takes from, call it bench to bedside, when we are developing a new product? How long does it take before the time we start looking at finding a new cure to when it actually reaches the patients? Any guesses?
18 to 20 years.
How many years?
18
18 to
to 20 years.
20 years, okay. Any other guesses? Yeah? At least 16 years, okay. Any other try? Yeah, both are really very close. It takes many, many years to bring to get a new treatment. And we can't just quickly go and get a new treatment. It takes a lot of gambling, to end up with the right treatment. On average, it takes anywhere from 10 to 15 years. That's the average. So what both of them said is right, because there are products that have taken up to 20 years before they made it on the market. But on average, it's about 10 to 15. And you will see why it takes that long to bring a new treatment on the market. What about the cost? How much does it cost to bring one treatment to the market? Any guesses? You said billions or millions? Okay, millions? 10 million? Any other guesses? Well, it actually costs... it's not there, eh? That's what I was saying. The numbers.
I have my
Can you put my...
Bring it.
Can you...
She'll bring the flash drive.
Okay. So it could not work with anything else.
So
okay.
Start while she's bringing it.
Okay. No problem. While they are setting up, we'll still keep moving. It actually costs about 2.6 billion, not millions, billion dollars to bring one treatment to the market. It may seem something that's unbelievable, but that cost is actually made up of two components. About 1.4 billion is spent in actual research and development, all the testings that have to be done. And then the other one, about 1.2 billion comes from what you call an opportunity cost. Because these companies are publicly funded, so the money that they could have invested in something else, they have locked it up in research, and that cost them about 1.2 billion. So the 1.2 plus the 1.4 in actual research and development expenditure puts the cost at about 2.6 billion. And then once the product is approved in the post-approval phase, it actually costs another roughly $300 million. So total cost is around 2.9 billion, or just call it $3 billion, is what it costs to bring one product on the market. That's why sometimes when people say, well, why does it cost so much why do medicines cost so much? It's because there's a lot of money that is invested in developing them. And I will tell you about, in terms of the testing, I will give you an acronym to remember in terms of the different phases we have to go through to bring a new treatment on the market, and it's going to be PCAP, PCAP. The P stands for preclinical, the A stands for, the C. The C stands for clinical, so you have preclinical. So usually when you hear the word pre, like preschool, you know what that means. That is before proper school. So preclinical is everything we do before you get to that clinical testing. We say clinical testing is really human testing, or clinical trial is human testing. So anything you do before it actually gets into human is preclinical. So that's the P. Then the C is clinical. Clinical is the period when the product is actually being tested in humans. And then after all the testing is done, it has to be approved. That is the A, by regulatory authorities like the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA. And then the last P is post-approval. After it has now been approved, that's when the product can actually get to the patients that will be using it. That's when the product is sold. And while the product is being sold, usually there are additional things that have to be done. In fact, once the product is approved, until a company stops marketing that product, there are things that we continue to do with the drug. Sometimes it's additional testing to see the longer term effect of a particular drug, or sometimes it is just, in the case of cancer, for example, you are looking at, the side effects. And any testing in humans that is done after it's approved is going to fall into a different phase. So if you remember the PCAP, those are the four main areas. Those are the four main stages. But then within the clinical stage itself, which is when we do the testing in people, there are actually four phases. The clinical is divided into four phases. And these phases are sequential. That means you have to do phase 1, before phase 2, before phase 3, and before phase 4. Now, what is phase 1 testing? Phase 1 is actually the testing that is the first time that a drug gets put into humans. I'm not going to bore you with what happens before then, but a lot of work goes on before a drug can be put into humans for testing. So that phase 1 testing, usually we test in, it's working now? Okay, good. All right. Thank you very much. So phase 1 testing is usually done in just a few patients, roughly 30 patients. In the case of cancer, it is actually done in patients who have cancer, right? The reason is many of the drugs that are used to treat cancer have a lot of side effects. So you cannot test those in healthy people, but in other disease areas, usually we use healthy volunteers, people who are not sick. That's when we do the first testing. So that phase 1 testing, usually in about 30 patients, the purpose of it is simply to find out how safe the drug is. As I said, before it goes into man, we would have done a lot of testing in the laboratory involving a lot of people, chemists, formulation scientists, quality engineers, people that can compound the product, and so on and so forth. And then we have to test the product extensively in animals before it ever goes into humans. When you test it in animals, we collect blood samples from those animals, we collect urine samples, test for things the same way you would do in humans. We want to see, for example, does this drug damage the liver? If it damages the liver, we are going to see a rise in some liver enzymes when we look at the serum of those animals. If it affects the heart, we do EKG in those animals the same way you would do in human beings to see what effect does it have on the heart. We check every major organ system in the body in those animals to give us a sense of these are the likely side effects we are going to see in people. So those extensive studies have to be done, and then we have to characterize to what extent did animals tolerate the particular drug. And then the first dose we are going to put in people is usually a factor, about 1/1000 of the dose that of the highest dose we tested in animals that did not produce any side effects. So we usually test different doses in animals. You push it until the animals start to get sick. And then you look at the last dose before the animals started to get sick. And then you have to take about 1/1000 of that to put into humans first. So in that first human testing, all we are looking for is safety. It's not about, does the drug work? That's not the issue. It's about, is it safe? And if it is safe, how safe it is. What is the margin of that safety? Because that's going to help us to determine what dose we are going to go forward with. So once that first phase is done successfully and you've collected the relevant data, then you go to phase 2. Phase 2 is now tested for specific diseases you want to treat. If your target is the treatment of breast cancer, you are going to have to recruit people who have breast cancer. And not just people with breast cancer, but with the particular type of breast cancer you are interested in testing. So in phase 2, that's when we answer the question, does the drug work? And for you to determine if something works, you have to get the patients who have that particular disease. And there are things you are going to measure to determine if it works or not. And usually that is done in about 50 patients. Usually anywhere between 50 and 200 is the average of the number of people that are tested in phase 2. So remember, phase 1 is for safety. You just want to see how wide of a margin you have with the product. Is it that every single dose you tested in people produced a side effect? Or did you push it up to like 100 times before you saw side effects? That's what you want to answer in phase 1. Phase 2, what disease do you want to, you are trying to prove whether your drug works. So you get the patients with a particular disease of interest and test out that hypothesis. If it works, now you go to phase 3. Phase 3 is a large trial that is usually done in hundreds and thousands of patients. Usually it's multi-center, not just in one hospital. We can do it in many different states in the US, even outside of the US. So you are testing it in a wide range of people, because when the product is approved, it's going to be used by a wide range of people, not just like people that have that particular disease. So in this case, in phase 2, you are very limited to, we just want people with this disease because we are trying to prove if it works. In phase 3, people that have that disease may actually have other diseases, like they may have liver problems, which can affect how the drug is handled by the body, which then affects how much dose, whether you need to adjust the dose or not. You could have people that have kidney problems who also have your disease of interest, and you may have to adjust your dose because they have those other problems. So phase 3 is done broadly across the world pretty much. So it's multi-center, and it's the data from phase 3 that is going to form the basis of the Food and Drug Administration approving and determining whether the effectiveness of your drug outweighs the risks. So that is very critical. And so as we go through those phases, what then happens is after all the testing is done from phase 1 to 3, we have to package all of that data and submit to the FDA for their review, which will take roughly 1 year for them to go through all the reviews, and then they can approve the product or not approve the product. So in actual fact, it's only 1 out of 10 products that make it into phase 1 testing that eventually becomes a drug that you and I can use. What happens to the other 9? They fail in clinical trial. So the failure rate is very, very high, which means the likelihood of hitting the right drug is just very, very small. So only 10%, 1 out of 10, is going to be successful. Some will fail in phase 1 because you couldn't find a dose that was safe. When you started putting it in human, then that drug is pretty much gone. You can't test it any further. It could be in phase 2. Maybe phase 1 looked okay. You went into phase 2, you proved the drug didn't work. Then you have to kill it and go look for a different drug that works. Or you could go to phase 3 and find that this drug really can only be used in a very tiny population of people because other people that have maybe coexisting disease cannot use the product. So these are all the things that we face. But FDA eventually approves the drug, goes on the market, and then once it's on the market, additional testing can go on. You could be looking for other uses. Maybe you originally developed it to treat breast cancer, but you could also find that it may work in other types of cancer. That's when you do those testing in phase 4. So these are the phases of clinical testing that we do. Before I move any further, I wanted to share with you, in terms of what we measure in the case of cancer, when we do the testing, how are we going to measure if the drug is working or not? We look at things like overall survival, which is basically, do the patients on the new treatment live longer than the people on standard of care? Now, one assurance I want to give you is that when it comes to cancer, and we are doing clinical trials, we usually make sure that every single person in that trial is receiving some form of treatment. So there should be no fear whatsoever that I'm taking a sugar pill, which we call a placebo. Because cancer is fatal, so it is completely unethical to give a sugar pill to somebody when you know they are not receiving any benefit from it for a disease that can kill. So in cancer, we do not use placebo. You have to use the standard of care. Standard of care is what kind of treatment is currently available for this particular disease. So everybody has to receive that. And then some people will receive the new drug that we are testing. So you look at overall survival, how many people, you look at those that are on standard of care versus your new drug, how long are they living? You look at progression-free survival, which is how long does it take from the time that the treatment started until the cancer starts to grow again. We also look at disease-free survival, which is how long it takes before there is evidence that the cancer has reoccurred or it has spread to other parts of the body. And then complete remission is, does the drug completely wipe off the cancer and we can't find the cancer anymore. So these are some of the things we measure to see how well and how effective the drug is. Many people should be participating in clinical trial, but they are not, and we are going to talk about that. I'm going to share with you a very important concept around informed consent. You realize that if you were to go to do any kind of surgery and you sit down with your surgeon, that surgeon is going to explain to you what procedure they are going to do, what are some of the potential complications they know that other patients have suffered, what are the likely benefits you will get from that treatment, and you have the opportunity to ask him or her any questions on your mind. And then they give you a form to sign that I agree that you've told me X, Y, Z. I agree that voluntarily I'm going to go into this surgery. That is what informed consent is. Now, minorities are very skeptical to go into a clinical trial, and it's not just for, there are reasons why that is the case. And I've asked two of our members during the break, I told them to talk very briefly about some of the ethical issues that we have encountered with minorities in terms of some trials that actually went awry, but they actually became the basis of some of the laws that exist today because changes had to be made. Some unfortunate incidents occurred. The first one actually happened between 1932 and 1972 for a 40-year period, where people were being treated. And I'm just going to ask Dr. Burnley to just share with us some perspective on what that is. Do we have, I don't know.
So, who knows the name of this 40-year study we're going to talk about? So, the Tuskegee study. Yes, and the full name of the study was the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male. So basically, in 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service started this study with about 600 African-American men, about 300 who had syphilis, and about 399 with syphilis, 201 without syphilis. And they basically informed them that we're doing a study on bad blood, basically people feeling weak or whatever. And the study was supposed to last for 6 months. It ended up lasting for 40 years. And even in 1947, when penicillin became available as an effective treatment for syphilis, they were not afforded that care. So basically, they just wanted to see the natural history of syphilis in, you would think just in humans, but they selected African Americans. And Associated Press story in 1972 was what broke this to the public, and there was a public outcry, and the study was stopped. And in 1973, there was a class action lawsuit. And the last participant, it was like a $10 million out-of-court settlement. The last study participant died in January of 2009. And their descendants, they're still, some of them receiving money from that court settlement. So, that was the Tuskegee experiment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brownlee. I mean, can you imagine being studied without you being aware that you are in a study. You were being lied to. This was actually by the US government, Public Health Service. We're not talking individuals now or companies. This is the United States government, the Public Health Service, subjecting people to, this was in Alabama, Tuskegee. So basically lying to people that, we are giving you free treatment. Then these people ended up, some of them had syphilis. They were not told they had syphilis. They were just told they had bad blood, right? Which could be anything, syphilis, anemia, all of them lumped together. And these people were basically, going through evaluation thinking that they were receiving some kind of free treatment. And this went on for 40 good years. I mean, that is just unimaginable. So the people were not aware they had syphilis. They were treated, like Dr. Bumley said, penicillin became available around 1947, which was a very effective treatment. These people were not given the treatments. They basically they were going without treatment. They ended up, most of them ended up dying. Their wives, actually 40 wives, became infected with syphilis. And some children were born with syphilis because their mother had syphilis. I mean, it's considered actually one of the worst cases of really abuse of clinical trial. And that became the basis of why today, you have to get informed consent. For us to test any drug in people, 3 things must happen. Number 1, we have to write a protocol. The protocol says, this is the testing we are going to do. This is the product we are going to use to test. These are the doses we are going to test the people on. These are the things we are going to measure. These are the likely side effects. All of that. We have to write that protocol. And that protocol has to go to an IRB, Institutional Review Board, or Independent Ethics Committee, which is made up of a group of people, including professionals and non-professionals, who are purely looking at the ethics of that study. That does it make sense? The study that is being proposed, does it really make sense? So the protocol has to be written, it has to receive IRB approval, and we have to submit that protocol to the FDA. Those 3 things have to occur. And there has to be an informed consent signed by the patient. There's actually another story that happened just in our neck of the woods here in Maryland at a prestigious university, right here in Maryland. And I'm going to ask my wife, who is an advanced practice nurse, to just talk to us briefly about, let me give you the mic, to just share that story with us. I think the two stories illustrate just very unfortunate incidents in our history, which have become the basis why minorities are afraid to go into clinical trials.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege for me to talk about Henrietta Lacks. I think everyone has heard about that. A 31-year-old African American who died, not because she stayed at home with cancer, but because she went to Johns Hopkins Hospital to get care. But that's not all she got. She didn't get the best care, but at the same time, they took some of her cells without informed consent. She didn't know. Even while she was dying, they tried to get more cells because it's all about them, not about her. The focus was not the patient, it was the money. That cell brought in a lot of millions of dollars, but the family had no insurance. They were not aware. This took place in 1951. The family did not know until 1975. And the only reason they knew was because people were calling them. Now they're trying to get more cells. So they were calling them to get their blood sample. And that's when they found out that this took place. This and everything that went on was against ethical principles. There was no informed consent. They stole her autonomy. Nobody cared that she existed. And I was wondering, why Henrietta Lacks? Before her, there were people with cervical cancer, and their cells were not taken. Is it because she was poor? Is it because she's not college educated? Is it because she was black? And the take-home message for me today is when you leave here to remember, Signing a paper is not informed consent. Informed consent is when you ask the physician, what are you going to do to me today? Can you tell me what you're going to do, exactly what you're going to do, step by step? Because if you don't, and you sign the paper, you own it. Henrietta did not even sign the paper, and she owned it. So we don't know what they do with us until we ask what they're going to do. Hold them accountable. Ask that question so that you have autonomy, that is ability to make a decision whether you want that taken or not. And I give example of myself. When I had my 9-year-old who is sitting here, I had to have a cesarean section because I had placenta previa. And when we went there in the morning with my husband, the anesthesiologist came in. After I told him I want to stay awake, he came in and was talking to us about the medication. What he did not know, he didn't know I was a nurse and my husband was a doctor. So now he's telling us about the medication that will put me totally out, even though I signed that I want to stay awake. So we let him go. Then my husband said, why are you doing that? Do you know the side effect of that? My wife didn't sign for that. He said, oh, I'm coming. And he never showed up. And one thing I've learned in America, being somebody who has come here, I started my nursing career here. One thing I've learned is that if you don't know, they do anything they want. But if you don't know, please ask questions. And if you don't understand the question, take somebody who knows with you so that you are getting the right care. We don't want to see another Henrietta Lacks, not because of the money, but look at the impact of her cells. Without that, there will be no DNA today. Without that, we will not know how to treat polio. Without that, the medical research will come to a standstill because of that woman. But the woman needs to be appreciated. The woman needs, the family should not be suffering when her cell is paying for other people's lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so if you subscribe to HBO, there's actually going to be the movie tomorrow on HBO on Henrietta Lacks, and I encourage you to try to watch it. I was actually privileged about 2 weeks ago. So we were the office of our chief medical officer hosted a meeting we call the Impact Meeting. We do this every year, and one of the highlight of that meeting was actually getting the privilege of meeting the family of Henrietta Lacks. They were invited to New Brunswick, our world headquarters, and Henrietta's granddaughter, who is a registered nurse, and one of their step sister-in-laws actually came, and we got a chance to talk to them face to face about the kind of travel they've gone through and sort of where they are. The good news, why I'm sharing these stories with you is actually not to scare you. It's to encourage you and let you know that because of those unfortunate incidents, there have actually been changes in the law of how clinical trials are conducted, which is why you now have to have this informed consent. So it's important that you are aware of your rights, that when you get involved in any trial, it is a voluntary process. That means nobody can force you into a clinical trial. Not your doctor, not anybody. You are the only one who can volunteer to be in a trial. And you can have all your questions answered by your doctor if you have any concerns about any trial. In fact, after you've gotten into a trial, you are free to change your mind at any point in time before the trial is completed. You can decide, I no longer want to be a part of this trial. And that will be your right. You can exit and leave with no penalties or consequences whatsoever. So a lot have changed since those incidents. Those specific incidents we talked about, they are much more difficult to happen today because of the laws that have been put in place as a result of that. So don't be afraid to get into a clinical trial because of participation. So how do we find a clinical trial? You basically talk to your doctor. Typically your doctor is going to know what kinds of trials are going on and which may be most appropriate for you. depending on the type of cancer that the particular patient has. You can also do your own research, but sometimes, there are many technical terminologies that you just may not be able to understand. So that is why we also have the cancer support community. If you go to their website, you can get a lot of information from there. There is the government also has a place online called clinicaltrials.gov. That is a place where we as companies are actually required by law to post information about clinical trials on that site. When we have gathered our data and have some results, we also publish those results in clinicaltrials.gov. So you can go there and do some search, but the most important thing is really to talk to your doctor so that your doctor can give you an insight into where you can get relevant information. And there are usually requirements, like the type of cancer you have and all kinds of things that have to be taken into account, like the stage of cancer you have, and if there are any genetic profiling of that, and so on. So again, talk to your doctor about that, and I'm going to try to finish up with just walking us through a few of why people don't participate. I've given you some of that information, but there are other reasons. Basically, one, people look at it as they are being a guinea pig. If I'm part of a clinical trial, it means I'm a guinea pig. Actually, I want to encourage you not to think of it in that light, because for one thing, we can never bring any new treatment without conducting clinical trials. That is required. It is the only way by which we can prove that a drug works or that it's safe. So by participating, you are actually, and doing that voluntarily, you are helping to advance the knowledge we know about treatments today. And typically when people participate, they are well taken care of. Your treatment is taken care of. The costs that you are likely to incur most of the time are covered. So it shouldn't be something that is onerous for you. But it's really, take your mind off that thinking of, I'm just a guinea pig, because you are not. You are really someone, whoever participates is trying to advance science and medicine. Also, the placebo issue, I addressed that earlier. A placebo is simply a sugar pill, or it's a dummy pill that looks like the real pill, but it contains nothing of that particular drug. The reason we do that is when we are comparing treatments, we don't want certain biases that are unconscious. Sometimes just because a patient goes to see their doctor and tell them about their problem, they could just go back home feeling much, much better. And they may feel like, oh, I really don't have this disease anymore, right? That is a placebo effect. Because there really wasn't a treatment, but just that connectedness with your doctor by itself brought some healing. It's like, some people who meditate. You meditate, and then, you feel some sense of, you feel much better. So there is that feeling of, even, so for people that are, if somebody knows that I'm going to be in a trial and the medication I'm taking is one that is supposed to work, there will be that feeling of, yeah, I think this drug is working, even if it is not working. So the way we tease that out is by comparing the new treatment with, I said in the case of cancer, with the standard of care. That means you are getting some treatment. But in other types of diseases, so apart from like HIV and cancer, we usually use a placebo to tease out that effect. So if we find now that the people who are on placebo have the same outcome as the people on the pill that we are trying to test, then we can conclude the pill is not working, right? But if we find a marked difference between those who are on the real treatment we are testing versus those on placebo, that gives us the indication that the drug is working. So for cancer, you don't have to worry about placebo because nobody is going to receive placebo. And then some people are worried that they may have to change their doctor because your doctor may not be participating in a particular trial, but that trial may probably be the best treatment for you. There shouldn't be any worries about changing your doctor. Just have an honest conversation with your doctor, and I know that your doctor will be helping you to get better, so they will recommend for you. Whoever they recommend for you, they would know for sure that this is going to be the best thing for you. So that shouldn't be something to discourage anyone from participating in a clinical trial. Another concern people have is cost. They think it's going to cost them a lot of money because many times they have to, make trips for evaluation. Because usually when you are on treatment, they have to evaluate how well you are doing, if you've experienced side effects, and what is the drug doing in your body, and so on and so forth. But usually those costs are covered. So again, just talk to your doctor and make sure that your costs are covered. This piece around suspicion or distrust, that's the one we talked about extensively today, especially among the minority population. There is suspicion and distrust because of the history that we have, which were clearly illustrated by those two examples that the folks who spoke to us gave. Again, the good news is that because of those unfortunate incidents, things have changed for the better. So in this generation, in this day and age, it can still happen, but it's going to be much more difficult for those things to happen just because of the safeguards that have been put into place. So people shouldn't really worry about that and not go into clinical trial. Another reason could be people just don't know. Nobody told them about a clinical trial. So you have to ask, if for example, somebody has a particular disease, you go to your doctor, they say, well, right now, there is no effective treatment. You can ask them the question, are there any clinical trials that may be going on that I may be eligible to participate in? So if your doctor doesn't actively volunteer that, you can ask and be a part of your own treatment. And then, of course, some people see clinical trial as a last-ditch treatment. It's like, well, all else have failed, and this is the only one last hope. But again, sometimes that is true. Sometimes the clinical trial may in fact be the one last hope, but there are actually countless examples of people who participated in clinical trials where it turned out to be that was the best decision they ever made, because that was the best treatment available. There was nothing else better than what was in the clinical testing. So, don't let that feeling of last-ditch treatment keep you from that. So, at the end of the day, why should people really participate? There is hope that by participating, people could get better. You could have access to the newest and the most innovative treatments available, and people do receive excellent care and monitoring. You are again helping to advance science and medicine, and you are contributing to the greater good of society. So it's important that people continue to participate in this. Again, communicating with your doctor is really the key in this. As far as the future is concerned, there are many types of clinical trials that are ongoing, really trying to test different things, either new treatments that are more effective or safer for the patients, and also now taking a lot of input from patients and advocates. So the final thing I'm going to close with is cancer experience registry for either patients or their care providers. They can be a part of the registry. The registry is really a community of people with the same type of issues where they can bond together, share things together, connect emotionally, physically, and socially, and also share the experiences they are having, how they are coping with their particular type of cancer, what kind of treatments each person is on, and that sort of thing. All of that information becomes useful to the medical and scientific community. So it does encourage self-advocacy. It helps provide evidence that policymakers can use in making changes. It eventually helps to improve the quality of life. And there are some resources which should be in the booklet that you have. Again, www.cancerexperienceregistry.org for anyone who wants to participate in that. And of course, if all fails, contact the cancer support community. You go to their website, you get a lot of information related to that. So this is where I'm going to end the presentation. And I don't know if we really have time for questions, but I can take one or two questions if anybody has, so that we can keep ourselves on track with the time. Any burning questions that anyone has that we can address now? Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for the highly informative presentation.
Very welcome.
In order to encourage our communities to participate, communities of color,
Yep.
what will you consider to be the benefits of phase 1 clinical trial? You've spoken about probably the later stages where
Correct.
there's probably some benefits.
Right.
But what will you ask somebody to be the advantages and disadvantages of phase 1 clinical trial?
Yep.
Knowing fully well that they are not sick.
Absolutely.
They are not subject to gain from that money.
Correct. Yeah. Very good question. So, let me say, in terms of phase 1, if it is cancer or HIV, we actually use people who have those diseases to do phase 1. So there is a likelihood that even while they are doing phase 1, because whatever drug we are testing is one for which we have found some evidence that this drug could work, maybe in animal models. We just haven't put it in people yet. And there's a high chance that the drug could in fact work and help those people. So for people with those two types of diseases, they could in fact get some benefits, even in phase 1. Now, for other diseases, we typically use healthy volunteers. And the benefit that comes from that is that by law or by regulation, we cannot simply go directly into like phase 2 or phase 3 without doing phase 1, because phase 1 is what gives us the initial indication of how this drug is going to behave in people. That's the first time the drug is being put in people. So we have to collect data about how safe the drug is. So the main contribution is that they are helping to advance science and medicine when they participate, but it is voluntary. Again, so it's not, nobody is forced into it. But if people realize that, yeah, the benefit that comes from this is it allows us to generate the evidence we need to be able to properly test the product in the later phases of trial. So in some way, the phase 1 has to be conducted. Unfortunately, we can't go directly into the other phases, but that's the way that the law has it, and people have to do it on a voluntary basis. Most of the time, college students, usually most phase 1 is conducted in healthy adults between the age of 18 and 45. Many of these people are college students. Now, in the olden days, before the laws we have now were put in place, they used to use prisoners, that means they are literally forced into it. That's why, we have things like the Declaration of Helsinki by the World Medical Association that says you have to put the patient first, because prisoners used to be forced against their will, and things were tested on them. Today, you can't do that. So those testings are advertised, whether in newspapers or directly by the doctors talking to their patients and saying, we have XYZ study, we are trying to look for a new cure, let's say for prostate cancer, but before we can test whether it works in prostate cancer, we have to test in healthy people to determine the dose range, because that's the only way we can find the dose range. So there's no other benefit that we can give other than helping to advance science and medicine. But it's a necessary step in the process that is unavoidable. But I understand your concern, because you're thinking there's no direct benefit. Why should I take part in it? But there are some diseases, for example, that are unique to, let's say, African Americans. Some diseases have racial inclination. So for those, we have to try to test it in the people that are like the population that is likely to benefit from that. So if it is a disease that's unique in that way, that will be the benefit that you are helping that racial group as a whole. Okay, I think in the interest of time, we have to stop. And if there are more questions, I'm going to be around till the end of the program. Please stop by, or please talk to any of we have a lot of physicians in the audience. Talk to them. I'm sure any of them can answer those type of questions. Thank you again for your time, and it's a pleasure.